Hey everybody, welcome back to Kolossal HQ for another episode of Kolossal Plays. Today we have a special edition where we will in fact not be playing. I am Chris Ham, the lead developer here at Kolossal, and I will be joined by my Franimus Chris Beyer, the graphic designer, and we're going to talk about some development that has taken place on Almanac the Dragon Roads, our latest Kickstarter, which is currently funded over 300% and up on Kickstarter now from designer Scott Almes, and take you through some of the earliest prototypes that he sent us when we were considering the game, and take a look at some of the changes and answer any questions that you may have regarding gameplay or graphic design or anything else that we possibly can in this instance. So, can you make it around?
Yeah, no, fine.
All right.
Situated.
So,
So
without further ado,
we have a whole bunch of stuff to talk about.
Sure.
So just a few notes. So let's go over the components and kind of the what the final product is going to look like. This prototype that we have is
Very late stage.
pretty close. All the tokens and stuff are the size that they will be. They're all the right thickness. These are the 1.8 millimeter chipboard. They have a nice feel in the hand. They're not too bulky.
And this is what we used in our live play last week as well, which is
Correct.
still archived here on the Facebook page if you want to check that out and see how the game plays with 3.
Yeah. Just keep an eye on it.
Yeah,
If anything comes through, it's fine.
Yep, well.
So there are, and it's broken down in the rules as well, on the front page of the rules, but there are what we call location components and just generic components. These are universal components, so
Such as the goods.
right, like the good
whatnot.
tokens, the money, the guards. Those are going to be components you use consistently across the entire page, or not page, game. And then there's the location encounters, or location tokens,
Correct.
which are specific to that location. So if I flip to...
Now, currently, we are storing them in our prototype late-stage numbered plastic bags. However, the plan for the game in its final form is to have a custom insert with wells that will be labeled with stickers from a sticker sheet to indicate the page that those components are necessary for, as you will not visit every page in the Almanac in each game. So it will expedite the gameplay and setup of each page.
So like, for example, the Cloud Monastery here has letter tokens that are unique to this page. So you would find the letter tokens in the insert, which is all numbered and labeled, and just throw these over here so that you have a place to store your tokens on the page. But they are only relevant to that page. And again, these are all the same thickness and same quality as all the common components. And then that way, when you're done with the page, you can just take your tokens away and put them, back in your box or set them aside. These tokens specifically, players are going to travel with them, and they'll have them in their caravans. Which, if you deliver these tokens to a specific location, which is covered on the back of these tokens, then you'll get a reward for delivering the letter from the monastery. And all the tokens go to one of the 4 locations towards the end of the map. So if we look at the big map here, letter tokens correspond to pages 12, 13, 14, and 15. So when you pick it up here on page 2, you're going to kind of, based on what letter token you get, if you want to go that route, it's going to determine which path you may want to try to travel down the road so that you can steer the party towards the location where you actually want to deliver that letter and get the bonus content.
Exactly. And if you flip to the next page,
Yeah.
additionally, as some of the location-specific bits travel with players, we have in the rulebook here not only a list and images of all the components, but the pages that they are relevant to. So when you go to tear them down, you'll have quick reference for which well they go in the insert as well.
Right. Yep. Let's all I have as far as tokens is concerned. The game book itself, we've done a few playthroughs. There are 17 pages total.
Correct.
So as you journey through the book, if I flip back to the big map here, you'll always start on space 1 here at the outpost, and then from there you have these branching paths. But the way that it works out is you'll have an encounter A, and then you kind of draw these columns almost across the map for encounters B, C, D, and E. And then kind of the route you take, though, is going to determine the
locations
that you'll see. Yeah. And we've seen comments about adding more pages and stuff to the book, and it's really not possible because of the way that the map is designed and laid out, and how the encounters are structured, so that as you make progress through this map, you are hitting these milestones as designed. You can't just throw another page into the mix.
Right. It's not only a matter of the encounters, but the pages are designed in such a way to have appropriate availability of certain action types. Now, there are pages that are deliberately short on potential action spaces, so that a player, as you grow more familiar with the Almanac and the more times you play, if you choose to play a strategy where you're not necessarily pursuing maximum workers, you might choose to steer the path, say through a Neverwood or things like this, where it's not necessarily ideal to have all 6 of your workers in play, as you can't leverage them. Yeah. But that is done with specific purpose, and additionally, there's an equal opportunity amongst all of the spaces or locations as destinations. So simply adding one additional one into the mix would skew those paths and cause all manner of issues with realigning the equal representation of the locations and thus all elements of the game. So it's not just as simple as adding a new page.
Right. Well, and that also plays into the replayability of the game and being familiar with the paths. So, like, if you rewatch the playthrough that we did last week, I am not super familiar with these maps as far as playing on them, and I kept running into the situation where I was bidding to be guide and choosing maps where I probably didn't want to be guide, and
based on your situation at that time.
Right. I fell further and further behind, on the second and third locations that we went to because I was first, and I really didn't want to be first.
Which it's certainly fine in a casual level game of Almanac. As you progress, higher level of difficulty amongst you and your game group, if you're more hardcore, which tends to be my play style, then you will become familiar with the various paths and try to steer it, which then affects the bid value of guide and whatnot. Right. So the game deepens as your ability to play it at a higher level grows. All of a sudden the price of guide escalates because now it's a really crucial decision which path we get to take. Or you position yourself where you're happy either way, and you choose to not make it as high or not be as important to you to bid for it because you've taken care that either outcome is good for you.
Right.
So
can you hand me a player screen?
Sure.
There, over here. So I've also seen some comments asking about player references and stuff, and so every player is going to have a player screen with their color on the back side, so as other players around the table can see what color you are if you don't remember. But then on the inside of every player screen is all the common icons that we'll find on every page. So every single page is going to have these icons to some degree. There are stuff like gaining contracts will show up in later pages,
which are standard actions.
Right, and these are all we call them common actions, and it has the icon associated with it and a brief description of what it is. If you want a more in-depth description, then there's a whole table in the rule book that breaks down the kind of nitty-gritty of each of these different actions and action spaces in greater detail and how they function. But also in the middle, it gives you a chart of the relative strength of fight encounters for each type of encounter. So You know, speaking to the replayability of the game, just the base game itself has 4 different versions of each of the 5 encounter types.
Exactly.
And only one of those in each of those 4, or one of those 4 in each of those degrees of difficulty, is a guaranteed fight. There are...
The rest is a little more...
Yeah, the breakdown, if I remember right, is there's 1 guaranteed fight, there's 1 optional fight, and then there's 2 special type of encounters, which could be wildly different from encounter to encounter.
Sometimes which are safe, sometimes they're not safe.
So as you're playing through and you're building your encounter deck for one game, for instance, you may have maybe 1 fight encounter the entire time, or maybe no fights, or you could have a game where every single one is a fight encounter.
Exactly.
So this helps you kind of prioritize your caravans. If you're going for a fighting strategy, if you know you're going to be leading the caravan, and you want to be able to get the rewards for fighting, then it gives you a target number to try and get to as you're planning ahead for that.
Now, along those lines, I've seen some questions and concerns regarding the element of luck in the game, which of course there is some randomness in the game. You certainly don't know what the contents of the encounter deck will be. You can have a rough idea that you'll probably have 2 or 3 fights depending on, but it's, there's no certainty there. Now, that is done for the sense of adventure in the game, which is really the core of Almanac, is the sense of traveling through the whimsical world of Baloria and exploring and going to new places. But that's not to say that randomness equals lack of skill. It's, there's hedging of your situation, and how prepared are you if there are fights? Are you willing to risk it? Are you willing to face the consequences? If you're playing a guide-heavy plan, then if there are fights, you will absolutely be the one who fights them first, in which case you may want to take that into consideration and have more guards. And interestingly enough, from a down the rabbit hole development side, this is part of what led to some of the evolution of the guard tokens throughout the process. Initially, they were only 1 strength, and they only stayed.
This changed a lot.
They stayed with you only from one town to the next. Then there was, then they were provided more strength and stayed with you temporarily, and then they were back down to 1 strength, and they stayed with you for the whole journey. And now they have ended up, they provide 2 strength each, and they stay with you the entire journey, but they also each provide you 1 fame or victory point at the end of the game, because this is an attempt to help offset that randomness. If you burn actions to generate guards to protect yourself, you're still going to be rewarded with some fame, even in the event that you're not forced to fight any encounters.
Well, and I think it might be in Merchant's Manifest. I'm trying to think. We have contracts that actually make your guards
even more useful, yes,
stronger and worth more points.
There's some
I think the Merchant's
where they lend a hand in other ways. So
there's a contract, one of the stretch goal contracts. I believe.
The dwarven, the mine there. I think it's number 3. If you turn to that page, right there, the covered mines. If you look at the ancient weapons.
Pay 2 gold. Yeah, ancient weapons do that. No, but what I was saying is there's contracts too.
Sure.
Like there's a stretch goal contract that actually allows your guards to carry things as if they are.
Yeah, you got to put them to work.
Yeah, you can actually put them to work. So not only do they now provide strength for your caravan and fame, but they also give you extra hauling space.
Well, the way we looked at it was being hired muscle covers a lot of ground, right?
Right.
We didn't specify in your guard contract that it was solely limited to
you just
combat.
A sword for
your hired muscle. So that can be a crate with legs.
Yeah, and speaking of stretch goals, so we have 3 different kinds of stretch goals. We have contracts, which are the contracts that are stretch goals are abilities that are a little more flashy and unique out there. Like, for instance, making your guards also count as crates. This is the only one that comes to mind. There's others. And then we have encounters, which again are like the same sort of thing. I think the stretch goal encounters kind of skew more towards the special type of encounters.
I wouldn't even necessarily say that. They push the boundaries a little more.
Sure.
more dangerous encounters or more interesting, interactions with them. And that's not to say that the base game ones aren't interesting, of course, but usually they are a little more, they stand out a lot more from the rest. And whether that is a special encounter and the potential rewards from that, or if they're a fight encounter in the danger that the players face. But they certainly add not only to the strategy that you have to consider, but the uniqueness of each play, and thus the replayability.
Right, and then the third one is the unique starting caravans.
Right.
Which adds the element of unique player powers to the game.
Sure.
So my starting caravan is going to be different from your caravan, and it'll give me some advantages in some way that I can try to leverage.
Right, and all of those, the abilities that they provide. I mean, again, it's just another element of replayability, which is one of the most fun aspects of Almanac. Is once you mix those combination of things together, you're never going to play the same game twice. Even if you take exactly the same path through the Almanac, the encounters are not, the odds of the encounters being exactly the same. If you're playing with the unique starting caravans, the likelihood that you're going to have exactly the same thing,
the contract,
it's simply not going to happen. And so, while there will certainly be similarities and that sense of familiarity, and you will have more knowledge as you play more times, you will never play exactly the same game twice, which is something that we love. We think that replayability is the ultimate in value.
It's one of the things that makes us feel special or different from a lot of other worker placement games. It's that small little nuggets of digestible, familiar mechanics.
Yeah.
But you get kind of like a sampler platter at a restaurant, right?
Wow.
I don't want the full steak dinner. I want a little bit of shrimp. Chicken.
Did I miss our sponsorship meeting with Applebee's?
It's like the board game equivalent of going to like Phil Good Shop.
Whew, that's a step up.
Endless worker placement samplings.
They come run.
Just go flip to green and you're good to go.
Flip to green and the party is on. So, those are some of the main impact of the stretch goal content and what it does for the game and the sense of adventure and replayability. That is, a big part of what first drew us to Almanac when Scott sent us the prototype.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm going to go ahead and pull down the prototype. So this is the original book that Scott sent us back when it was called Southern Shores. So a big part of what we have done with this is taken the idea and fleshed it out.
Might be.
Bad refresh.
I did.
So that looks like we're good. Okay.
All right.
So I mean, like the mechanics and the core concept of the game is easily transferable to other settings and stuff, and we have plans for other stuff in the future. But right now, Southern Shores or Dragon the Dragon Road is the focus. But if we just go to the Outpost, this is the Outpost that we have now, and this is the one that we are presented with. So it was these are great. These are all, I believe, Scott hand drew these.
Yes, and as I often joke on our streams that I don't get to keep playing with the games once they're pretty. And Bayer will laugh as an artist and a graphic designer knowing how horrible my personal prototypes look. So when I saw this, I'm like, well, this is already beautiful. Like, this is an incredible step up. And then I considered the need for me to acquire a nice 72 box of Crayolas should I ever try to make something similar.
So in Scott's original, he had we've retained a lot of the same design elements and kind of layout. The big difference is he had the map on every single page, so we kept that for the Outpost, but we just did it without the overlay of like the routes and stuff. The idea here was, on the first page you're presented with this map of the world that you're about to journey into.
Mm-hmm.
In Scott's version, it laid out the exact paths all throughout the world with the supply and demand of all these things. There was a lot of information that was kind of front-loaded onto that map, and that actually appears on every single page. So on every page there is the map that shows the possible routes that you can take. Our solution to, because we thought that information was important, we wanted to provide that, so our solution was to just make the big 2-page spread on the front of the rulebook instead, if players want to reference that during the game. I know my experience playing through this was just having that amount of information available at all times kind of slowed the game down a lot, as you were not only considering your options on this page, but then the impact of, if I go here, then I also, you're kind of planning your route and playing towards the entire route, before you've even made it past the first page. Or
the reality, though, also is that we discussed the familiarity element as you play more.
Right. It kind of eliminated that sense of discovery.
It's not just the sense of discovery, but the thing is while you have this map, but you're not familiar with the game, it doesn't really provide you with any additional value.
Right.
And then once you are familiar with the game, you don't need the map. And so it doesn't provide you with any additional value. But what does provide the additional value, if you'll flip back to what we have now, is very clear demonstration of the page-specific rules and the setup and the content.
So the Almes was a pretty basic one, but here, for example,
right,
Cloud Monastery.
So this didn't help you when you didn't know the game, and once you knew the game, it didn't really continue to help you. But this other stuff, clean and concise setup for each page, because while the specific rules for each page are not particularly complex, each one is different, and so making sure that players understood that and were clear if there were special 2-player rules or whatnot, we felt long-term was more valuable to the play experience than the map on each page, when it can simply be referenced by one included in the rulebook.
But I mean, you can see the DNA of a lot of this and this.
Exactly.
We still have the name of the page and the page number and the intro text, which is still here. We have all of our setup instructions and special rules. We eliminated the map to give more space to this, so that it was large enough to read from anywhere at the table.
Exactly.
But we still retain, your possible destinations and their supply demands, so you can plan ahead. We give a little preview of the location, just the artwork, so you can look on your map if you're referencing the map and see those locations on there. We still have what the encounter is, and then Travis had the great idea of adding these kind of little blurbs about the location. So not only did you get this
travel or travel agent.
Yeah. So not only do you get the technical information, but you get kind of a little flavor-filled preview of what the location is about, kind of thematically what you're, like a thematic preview.
Well, exactly, and that adds to the sense of discovery as you play through the first couple times, but as you become more familiar, it will also act as a mnemonic device to help you remember, I know what happens there, and is that good for where I'm at or not? Right. So it's a subtle thematic element that also can help grow with your familiarity with the game as you progress and play at a more skillful level.
Yeah, and then another thing I kind of want to point out is, so we've talked about the rules on the pages, and the rule book itself is not long.
Oh no!
Like the actual rules for the game, as far as learning how to play the game, once you get past setup, the rules for the game is 1.5 pages, and then the rest is reference.
Yeah.
So there's we have. This is almost the entirety of how to play the game and the rules that pertain to the game. And then the rest is kind of breaking down the components in greater detail. And a big part of that was putting a lot of the rules on the pages themselves.
Yes.
Because the common stuff that you have to reference will just become second nature. And a big part of that was also including the end of game scoring on your final destinations. Yeah. So, as you're playing through the game, our goal is that you don't have to reference the rules often, if at all, because everything you will need to know is either on your player screen for the common stuff, or it's going to be on the page itself.
Right, it will be with the asset that you're interacting with,
right.
The contract, the page in the Almanac itself. And so you know, people talk about accessibility in games, but this is an unbelievably accessible game, and that's part of the fun of it. Is all of the needless rules and everything get out of the way, and then, oh, I'm at this place. What is the local custom? Well, that's, you know, in this case, obviously it's a rule, but that's like the Almanac. Part of the element of it is, oh, well, when we are in Dragon City, or when we are in...
What's the twist in this location?
Exactly, and so it's like learning about the locals and their customs and laws and whatnot. And you know, you get started quickly and you're rolling, and that element adds to the sense of discovery, rather than bogging it down in a long process where you're trying to learn. You're ready to roll very quickly. And, you know, that's good in any game, but it feels really right for the weight of this game as well. Which that, you know, was already present in Scott's earliest design. I mean, I looked at it when we first got it, and I was like, oh my goodness, you know, I've got to show this to the team, and I think this is something that is really strong. And that was everybody's initial reaction. It was, wow, I can't believe how quickly we got rolling and how fun it is.
It was one of those games where you play it and you're like, how has nobody done this before?
Yeah, and as I understand it, there are some games that you play in the books.
There are story books. I know Plaid Hat has quite a few of them.
I do think.
But they're not like this. So like the one that comes to mind that I've played is Stuffed Fables, where you're playing through a story, but that's more campaign style, where the page that you're playing on is just one part of a story. This one is you're going on a journey through the book every time.
And that's what I think is you make your own story in this, because this does not actually have a narrative per se, as in one page tells a story that then leads into another story. So there are certain comparisons to the choose your own adventure element, but that's not fully accurate. Exactly. Yes. And that is why the random encounters play such a role, and the random contracts that you have in each game play such a role. It's more like choose your own path, but create your own adventure, really, right? Because each one is different, and you couldn't do that if they were wedded together by a specific narrative other than we are traveling across this land.
Right, where you have agency over how the game evolves and plays.
Yeah, and of course, as we continue to ramble on here, if you have any questions, by all means, ask them in the chat, and we'll answer them as we can. Additionally, we'll keep an eye on this video, you know, certainly for the remainder of the campaign, and if any questions crop up, stop back by to answer them for you.
One thing I do want to remind everyone of, or I guess announce, because we haven't posted anything about it, is on next Monday at 5 p.m. we're going to be doing a live call with Scott, designer of Almanac the Dragon.
Yes, one of our favorite humans. Scott is great.
So Monday, January 20th at 5 p.m. we'll be doing another stream with Scott and kind of talking to him and doing a little interview and taking questions about the game and the process and anything.
The genesis of it, you know, how he came to this idea, you know, I mean, certain elements that he can answer more personally than we can about the game. Yeah,
I mean, we can talk forever about developing it
and
doing the design and stuff. But
I can certainly go down the dark rabbit hole where Bayer got to look at me as I combinationally went after all the possible numbers on the contracts to make sure that, let's just say, there's equal representation of the goods on the contracts, and let's leave it at that.
You did the math.
I won't bore you with the gritty details.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that's really all I have to say about Almanac, is that it's fun, it's unique, it's very accessible. I've never played anything like it.
Those are all good things.
All good things.
So, as I don't see any questions currently in the chat, we will be finishing up here in just a second. So please remember to check out Almanac the Dragon Road on Kickstarter. And you know, if you like what you see back, if you have any questions, ask them on the Kickstarter page or here, of course, and
or on BGG.
Or on BGG. We do our best to be
present
responsive.
on all of those things.
Yes, we are omnipresent as much as we can be. And thanks as always for watching. Be sure to tune in for the special edition next Monday night when we talk to Scott and get some questions ready for him. So we'll talk to you then, and thanks for watching.